So hi, good morning. So when I finished my PhD in computational biology, I was thinking about the next move. It was way before I heard Yankee's lecture, and I could tell myself, well, you don't have a job, never mind, the future is now. So I really had to find something else to do. I knew it had to be something that uses not only my knowledge and my skills, but also it had to have an impact on people's lives. So when I came across an ad from Prize for Life, a nonprofit organization which focuses on ALS, it was almost as if my name was written on it. Now, at that time, I hardly knew what ALS was. And to be frank, I did not hear the name Prize for Life at that time. But what caught my attention was the non-conventional way of thought. The belief that a cure can come from non-trivial sources, and the fact that the organization was founded and is being managed by ALS patients, meaning that those are patients that are paving the way to cure their own disease. So I wanted in. So now, as a scientific officer in Prize for Life, I can tell you more about ALS. So ALS is a neurodegenerative disease that kills 1 in 1,000 people, most of them at the peak of their lives. What happens is that the motor neurons, those that are responsible for every voluntary movement, like walking, talking, breathing, and eating, massively die. We don't know why it happens in most cases. Only in about 10% of the cases, we know we can point at the genetic source of the problem. Now, while patients become progressively paralyzed, their cognitive abilities remain intact, so they know what is happening to them. The guy that founded our organization is called Avichai Kremer, and the way we usually act is by a prize model, meaning that we recognize a barrier in a way to a cure. We announce what sort of results we want from people, and we launch an international challenge. What is nice about this method is that it brings the most brilliant minds in the world to think about the disease and to overcome the challenge. So, for example, last summer we closed the treatment prize challenge, which was a 1 million award for a group that will elongate the lives of an ALS mice model by 25%. So we marked the result that we wanted. We wanted to have ways to increase survival. So this method has brought the organization the Prime Minister's Award for Innovation and Entrepreneurship in 2011. But sometimes we say, okay, there are challenges that we want to overcome by ourselves. So one such barrier is the lack of objective data. So one of the main barriers in the way to a cure for ALS is that we don't have enough data. We don't know enough about the disease. So the reason for that is first that ALS is variable between patients. So each patient is his own story in terms of how the disease starts, how it progresses, and in what pace. It is exactly this lack of pattern. This lack of pattern is exactly what makes it so difficult to find a cure for ALS. So the data that we do have about the disease comes from subjective questionnaires. Now, when an ALS patient goes to the doctor, they would be asked a standard questionnaire about their everyday functionality. So they would be asked questions like, how do you rate your sleep? Or do you feel you have trouble eating? Now, while the answers to those questions do give us some information about the disease, it is still not something that we can base real tough science on. Now, you have to understand that when patients become progressively paralyzed, they tend to skip doctor visits because, well, every trip out of the house becomes a project. And to make a bad situation even worse, the answers to the subjective questionnaires are not pulled into the one single database. So it is very difficult to make sense out of that. So naturally, we decided to overcome all of that, and with the help of others, of course. And we launched on a project which will transform the way data is being collected from ALS patients. It is called the ALS Mobile Analyzer. And what it is a software platform that uses the mobile phone built-in sensors to monitor ALS patients in their daily and natural environment. It monitors the way patients walk, talk, breathe, and also assesses their fine motor skills. So it does it by passive measurement. And on top of that, we add an additional layer of information, which comes from activities that we asked patients to do. So for example, we show patients a figure on the screen and ask them to trace this image with their finger. We also ask them to perform a finger tapping exercise. So by using all that, we can have a nice image of their fine motor skills. On top of that, we ask patients to answer the standard questionnaire, the one that they know from their doctor visit. So we have a baseline for comparison and for validation of the results. Now, we did a soft launch of the application 4 months ago, and we already have more than 90 patients worldwide using the app. So you can imagine that very, very quickly we'll have more data about ALS than was ever collected since the disease was identified 150 years ago. So the data is being transferred from a smartphone to the cloud, and then we're doing analysis, and we are looking for patterns. We then transfer information, partial information based on relevance, to clinicians, to researchers, and to pharma companies. So for example, if I take an individual ALS patient, the ALS analyzer can detect specific time points in which an external intervention can save their lives. If the analyzer detects lung deterioration, an alert would go off in the clinician's office. The patient would be asked to come for respiratory aid. So that's one life-saving example. For researchers, such a huge database, for the first time, researchers for the first time will have the opportunity to find patterns in the data and to deeply know more about the disease. So for example, we could subtype ALS because we don't know. Maybe those are actually several different diseases. Pharma companies are investing tons of money in ALS research and in finding and they try to find a cure for ALS. All of the trials so far have failed. What they are doing essentially is they are dividing two groups of patients, to trial groups and to the trial group and to placebo group. So, and they are giving the potential drug to the trial group. But the way they test it is by the subjective questionnaire. So for the first time, they will have an objective tool to ask whether the trial group is really progressing slower. So as a nonprofit organization, we have the privilege to work with volunteers. And for this project, we have a wonderful team of volunteers from STAP Labs Israel who have done most of the software development. The analysis is being done by volunteers from Intel and from Microsoft, and I'm sure that here in the crowd there are many motivated people who want to help to see and see a fatal disease cured and would like to join us in our efforts. The app is being accompanied by world-renowned ALS clinicians, so as our clinical advisory board. And this approach has already won us two very prestigious prizes, the Genesis Generation Prize and the CER Prize. So as I said, you are more than welcome to join us, see this fatal disease cured. And if you have questions, I'll be more than glad to answer. Thank you.